Thank you very much. Well, good morning and welcome to the Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Ed and CIP. So today we're going to be going over some CIP budgets, but if we could call roll first and then we'll get started. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. Assemblywoman Carlton. Assemblyman Frierson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hathan. Assemblywoman Howdigi. Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Senator Cannizzaro.
Here.
Senator Kiekefer.
Here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Sievers-Ganzert. Chair Dondera Loop.
Here, and just for reference, we're receiving some really odd feedback on this end. But thank you very much. And thank you so much for taking roll. We have members present and they will be in and out. I think Assemblywoman Howdigi is the only one who is excused or absence excused. So I know that many of you have bills to present, so we'll try to be as efficient as we can. Please mute yourself when you're not talking. And I will open up the chat on the bottom of our screen, but don't hesitate to raise your hand or holler out if I miss you. There's always a whole lot going on. So today we have 45 CIP projects on the agenda. So we're going to go quickly as we can, including projects from the Department of Administration, Office of the Military, and Department of Veteran Services. That today is the third and final CIP budget hearing of the legislative session. And Mr. Ward Patrick, Administrator of the State Public Works Division, when you're ready, please go ahead and begin your presentation.
Good morning, Ward Patrick, Administrator of the Public Works Division. With me, I have Kent Lefevre pictured to my right, and your left is the Deputy Administrator of Professional Services, also in the room, and if called upon to answer questions for Buildings and Grounds, my Deputy for Buildings and Grounds, Ron Cothran. Good morning again, and thank you. This is Ward Patrick for the record. This again is the third meeting of the CIP subcommittee. I can't see the slides that we're on. Is that that's a problem for me?
We don't see your slides either, sir.
Okay, thank you. And now, Sharon?
And now, just as we requested, there they are.
Very good. Ward Patrick for the record. So today, next slide, please. We'll be going over projects affected by previous budget reductions. As you mentioned, following Department of Administration, Nevada Office of the Military, and Department of Veteran Services projects. Looking at those projects that have had previous budget reductions, we see these three projects for the Department of Administration and one from Veteran Services. So during the special session, funds were removed from these projects. So what is now being requested is 21 PL1 for advanced planning of the Grant Sawyer building. This project was reduced from full design through schematics, and it's nearly complete with that schematic design, current status. 21 M01, which was the central plant renovation from the Attorney General's office building, This project had the construction removed from it, and we're approaching full design completion, and it'll be shovel ready upon approval. And the third project under the Department of Administration is the exterior renovation of the Nevada State Capitol and Annex building. This project is like the prior project. The construction funding was removed, and this project is shovel ready. Drawing your attention to veteran services, the pavilion renovation at the Northern Nevada Veterans Memorial Cemetery in Fernley. This project was canceled, so there was no progress made on this project due to lack of funding, and so this project will be asking, which you'll see later, full design as well as construction. To the Department of Administration, following the posted agenda, we see here project 21C02, and so this is our beautiful Southern Nevada Fleet Services maintenance building near Grant Sawyer building on that site, and this is a rendering of that facility. This is a shovel-ready project funded for design in the 17 CIP. And here's a vicinity map. I'm sure many people know that's at 555 East Washington, and looking at our aerial photography, you'll see the red box there, and the plan is, and the design is completed, is to not impact the solar field immediately to the south of this installation. Now to the budget and scope. So here we have a total budget of $9.3 million, of which $600,000 is for professional services, and the balance is for construction and miscellaneous services. This project it will be in addition to the La Hacienda facility operated by Division of Fleet Services. And pause for any questions on this project.
Yes, sir. I believe Assemblywoman Gorlow has some questions.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a quick question regarding the fleet service budget. Why should this project be considered now, given that the fleet services budget cannot afford to pay debt services for the 21-23 biennium? And can you also explain in detail how this project is recommended to be funded?
Ward Patrick, for the record, thank you for the question. I would like to phone a fiscal friend. I'm hoping that Matt Tuma from Administrative Services Division is on the line.
Hi, Matthew Tuma, Administrator for ASD, for the record. So I'd be happy to answer that question. Or those questions. So this project is, because it's a $9.3 million project, generally one of the largest things to fund on internal service fund projects are large infrastructure investments, because those can tend to cause rate shock. And so the way that those projects are typically funded for internal service funds is that they are financed in some means and then paid back over a long period of time. And so, or over a period of time. Some of those projects have ranged from just several years to several decades, depending on the nature of the project, depending on sort of the circumstances of the budget account, the circumstances of the decision-making process for the state. This project is proposed to be funded by bond funds that would be sold during the next biennium and then start the repayment schedule in the following biennium. So that's typically, or that's pretty common for these infrastructure projects or for large investments in one shot that need one shot funding, is where we'll go for some type of financing, either through the general fund or through bonds or through some other mechanism. mechanism and then pay it back over a period of time. One of the things that leads us to believe that we have long-term stability to pay this debt service back is the declining debt service obligation of the fleet services budget. So for example, in this fiscal year, we have a roughly $2 million debt service obligation for FY21 in fleet services. That goes down to $423,000 in FY22 and down to $125,000 for FY23 through FY34, and then goes to zero following FY34. So absorbing a payback term over a period of about a decade would be absorbed in sort of that declining debt obligation for the budget account. What's proposed in the governor's recommended budget would be to not start paying those terms back until the following biennium, so starting FY24, but can be absorbed in this declining debt obligation. Did that answer all of your both of the questions, or was there some more detail that you wanted me to go into?
I think that answered my question, and I'm running out of space to write. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, I would love, Matthew Tuma again for the record, I would love to get down into the weeds and in a technocratic way in any detail you or the staff would like to of what we're looking at. But yeah, that's kind of our top level look.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Additional questions on this?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Assemblyman Roberts?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. And more so for maybe all of these projects is if we approve these this time, what's the timeline for awarding of the contract for construction and actual construction? I guess it's going to be pretty much the same for any of these that would be approved.
So Matthew Tuma for the record, it does depend on the project and the financing for at least internal service fund projects. For this one, as Ward had mentioned, as Administrator Patrick had mentioned, there's a request for a continuation of the planning that has some dollars left in that project from the 19 authorization, or I'm sorry, from the 17 authorization. And so they could start some of the initial planning work as we would prepare to sell a bond later on in this calendar year. But we would expect bond funding to be available by the end of this calendar year in FY22 to begin sort of the finalization of the planning. I think Ward can go into a little bit more detail on that, but as far as funding availability, we would expect that to occur in FY22.
That's good. Thank you. That's a good answer. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I believe Assemblyman Levitt also has a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I was looking, is this project not available for any kind of federal match funding? Is that not something that's even possible? If it's just paid through your bonding, there's no federal funding available for this project?
Matthew Tuma for the record. So no, correct. No federal funding is recommended or has been achieved at this time. I think we always look for federal opportunities to invest in infrastructure. And if that opportunity occurs, we would want to work with the GFO and LCB staff to bring those opportunities forward. But at this time, it's proposed to be funded upfront by bond funds and paid back by the internal service funds.
Okay. And just another question out of curiosity, it's $9.3 million or 6,150 square feet on land that we already own. It seems pretty expensive per square foot. Can you just explain maybe why the expense?
Ward Patrick for the record, Administrator of the State Public Works Division. So this is a project that was brought to the legislative session in 2019, and it was a little cheaper then, but this project has been growing in price due to escalation and inflation, which we provided a report on that to LCD staff. And so also I would point out that in the construction business, cost of construction is higher the smaller the building that we plan on building. So there's always economies of scale, and so this project gets hurt by that. I would also point out, and I would thank our architects, thank Member Carlton for requesting in the 2017 session that this building be beautiful. And so with that, if you looked at the rendering, we would see that this is not a tin shed along the side of the road. And so this will be very complementary to other state assets. And then in addition to that, I would point out the standard 338 requirements of bonding, qualified bidders, and prevailing wage. And so that is our estimate for this project that's been verified by our consultants.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, sir. Okay, with that, I don't believe I see any more questions, so. we
Madam
will-
Chair, if I may.
Oh,
since
I'm
my-
sorry, Assemblywoman
My
Carlton.
name was
please.
almost taken in vain.
You
I
have a
do
chance
remember-
to regroup here.
I do remember that conversation in 17 and for the members, the basic idea was it's going to be sitting on the same property with the state office building. And we just didn't want to make it look like it really didn't belong there. And we should have pride in our state buildings. So it was a little more in jest, but just a bit serious to make sure that we built something that we all wouldn't want to look away as we drove by. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that, Assemblywoman, because we have to remember that many of our buildings are within kind of residential districts as well, and people will drive by them every day. So thank you very much. Any additional questions on that or comments? Okay, with that, we will move on, please.
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record administrator for the State Public Works Division. We're now looking at a wonderful shot of Hobart Lake here. And so this is what we'll be talking about, is the dam that holds back this water that's part of the Marlette Lake water system, as well as the fisheries for the Department of Wildlife and Recreation in the Spooner State Park system with bike trails around the perimeter. So here we see Lake Tahoe on the left, Marlette Lake in the bigger dashed area, and then this little Hobart Reservoir, and that's again what we'll be talking about. This is a vicinity map oriented on the project with Carson City located on the right-hand side there. Here it is with a system map that also includes topographic, which you probably can't see that there, but some of the red lines here are all about the piping system. And so for those members that were on the committee for the interim committee for the Marlette Lake water system, to the left you see a dashed pipeline. This is, or a dashed line, this is the old Marlette Flume. So this is a historic water system up here. Began in 1875 and purchased by the state in 1963. So that dashed line is now a bike trail. And then in the upper left, you see incline tunnel. This collapsed in the late 50s, and the state started pumping over the top of the hill instead of gravity feeding water through the hill, through that incline tunnel. Still in play is the east slope catchments. So you see that in the light blue. And then we work our way to, there's a series of 7 catchments. So there's these little streams that it's surprising even in the fall. There's all this water that's being caught up there You know, when you think it's dry outside, we were up there this last fall, and a potential new customer was very impressed with water that was still being produced out of this hill. And there's twin lakes up above that's probably causing those springs to be producing throughout the year. And then finally, you work your way down and you see the Hobart Reservoir, the generator building, and the pump station that pumps over the hill into Hobart Reservoir. And eventually this all goes down to either Carson City at the 1 MG reservoir, the 1 million gallon reservoir, and also goes to Story County. So thanks for that time to kind of explain our system up there. So there's a lot of piping, and some of it is still in place from I think there were 3 pipe siphons that went to Story County in 1875, 1877, and 1879, and the 1877 one is still in play, that labeled siphon there in kind of the right center of your figure. Thank you for that. And the next slide shows the Hobart Dam on the right, and so in the foreground, this is where it failed in the 50s and was redeveloped, repaired. And in the background, you see the actual dam that was originally constructed, and so it has some stonework on the front. And doing our due diligence following the Division of Water Resources request to have engineering studies done on dams that are either of high risk or significant risk, which this is a significant risk dam. We found that the soils used in this dam, this earthen dam, don't need any special structural integrity, so that it's subject to what if it was built this way today, it would be improper construction. And then as part of this project, you see part of the overflow and a bridge there, which this picture makes that bridge look like it's very functional. Of course, it's not ADA compliant, and all those beams on the bottom of that are warped. And so that's a little description of some of this. I'll leave the tree pictures up for your enjoyment. Here again, we see the bridge, and I would point out that when we work on these grants, we believe it's very important to get the people that are going to be reviewing these grants or know something about these grants, the federal emergency management people, out to the site to understand the projects, and we like to think that helps them take ownership in them. And so the first grant that we were approved for, which was after the last session, is the Marlette Dam. And so we had an individual from Region 9 up there that helped coach us through how to do the grant application. Although we had a great team of experts, if you're doing these projects that are nationally competitive, it's nice to have your very best foot forward. And so we had a wonderful team, including various consultants and in-house staff. And that project is proceeding, not as fast as we would like, but we're hoping to be doing some environmental as well as historic preservation final review, so the Marlette Dam project could be awarded. So here we see some of the visitors to the dam, and would enable the Marlette Dam to be funded, to be moved ahead in the FEMA process. And we also would exercise that same activity on this dam, which is the Hobart Dam in this request here today. Now to the budget. So this is a $13.9 million project, $2.2 million of professional services, and approximately $10 million of FEMA funding has already been applied for. And the state funding request here is $3.9 million of bond funding. And so this project benefited by last session having a FEMA grant to actually do the design to the schematic level. So that's about a third, 35% of the whole design. And actually that fact also adds points in the review of the $10 million grant. So that adds points when the reviewers look at this grant application. So we're pretty excited about that. And then we'd also point out that we need to advance this project to the 66% level or through what we call design development before they can award it. So again, FEMA can do the environmental and historic preservation review. And so that state funding up front will also be eligible for part of the grant reimbursement if awarded. Any questions on the Hobart Reservoir Dam Rehabilitation Project?
Thank you very much. I think Senator Ratty.
Thank you, Chair Dondero Loop. So first of all, I have to say to everybody on the committee, if you've never had an opportunity to go tour the Marlette Lake water system, I highly recommend it. There's a very narrow window that you can go when there isn't snow covering up some of those 100-year-old pipes and things, but you do get to hang out at some alpine lakes, and it really is a miracle that this whole system still functions. So I highly recommend that, and I always get every chance I get commend the very small and mighty team that keeps the whole thing working. I'm curious about the $10 million FEMA grant. You talked about that a lot, but timing, when do we know when an award determination might happen?
Thank you very much for that. And that's in my notes in our response. But generally speaking, this is Ward Patrick for the record. Generally speaking, we've applied for this to the state emergency management in December, and they forwarded, and of course they were part of the development team, but they forwarded that to the federal system in January, and we expect to have preliminary information before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
So, and then Ward Patrick for the record, and then what I mentioned before is we still have to do some design that's pre-award design work to enable the design for it to be awarded, and so that these FEMA grants are not known, don't have a tight schedule, and so I would venture to guess when that would happen. So I'll try not to do that. Thank you.
And then I know we're wading into, I know there have been lots of conversations about how we work with Story County and Carson City to keep the operating side of the Marlette Lake water system going. This is the capital side. Why are they not part of the solution?
Yes, thank you for that question. To start off, I have a little dialogue to give you, but I'd like to read something from the Public Works Director from the Carson City. In their mind, they are more of a partner to the infrastructure that is used in getting the water from the lake and then down to Carson City, and not so much the lake itself. They've shown the evidence of this partnership in the last bond, which was sold for the work to the generator, pumps, and pipeline work. This is solely being paid for by Carson City and I believe Story County at $600,000 per year combined. Then stated is to issue substantial additional debt to the already burdened rate would potentially price the water out of reach for either of the customers. That's a message from the Public Works Director. And then I would add to that NRS 331-160 allows for general obligation bonds. There's precedents from last session that we're using bonds to fund this type of work in projects 19C08 for the Marlette Dam referenced previously. And also a project not referenced is the generator controls replacement and pump replacement. Hobart Reservoir Dam is an asset owned and operated by the state of Nevada, similar to assets that receive CIP funding. Although this facility is operated by Marlette Lake Water System, it also provides benefits to other state agencies, which we mentioned earlier, wildlife and parks, and the using public. If Marlet Lake water system were to cease to exist, the state would still own these assets and would be responsible for their maintenance. Thank you.
Okay, so I heard no thank you. And I guess, is it the state's position that that's reasonable? Given the difficulties of, given how critical the dam infrastructure is, given the safety issues, given the difficulties of getting this project moving along?
Yes, certainly. So as part of the national emergency preparedness, Public Works is required to do emergency access plan, of which my name is listed of who they call or who is responsible in the event of a problem. And so I've taken it very seriously to approach FEMA to get this larger amount of grants. And so this has failed before, and under the research we've done as recommended by Water Resources, there's nothing special about the configuration that's up there. It's a earthen dam that's a pile of dirt as opposed to an engineered earthen dam.
Yeah, I very much want to see this move forward. There's so many barriers, and the timing window is so narrow when you can do construction, and so many other reasons. So thank you. Thank you for answering the questions.
Matthew Tuma from Administrator from ASD, just to tack on to that and agree with Administrator Patrick about the appropriateness of funding these through different ways, where Senator Ratty, you pointed out exactly that this is land of multiple use. And so it's not just for the benefit of the ratepayers for the system. And so like Administrator Patrick pointed out, the ratepayers do pay a significant portion of the infrastructure improvement costs for the infrastructure that they're the primary beneficiaries of. And this would just be a recognition that there's multiple uses and there's multiple liabilities that don't necessarily have to just do with the delivery of water and the ratepayers responsible for that. And so it's a balance of all of those interests to move forward with a recognition that we utilize this asset for a lot of things to benefit the people of the state of Nevada.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good questions. Thank you very much. Do I see anybody else with questions on this subject? Okay, if not, please go ahead.
Lord Patrick, for the record, I'd turn over the next couple planning projects as well as the maintenance projects for the Department of Administration to Kent Lefevre, my deputy for professional services.
Kent Lefevre for the record. The next project that we would like to present is the advanced planning for Grant Sawyer office building remodel. This is a vicinity map showing the general location of the Grant Sawyer building, which is Washington and Las Vegas Boulevard. This is an aerial shot of the site plan outlining the building. Over recent years, there have been several failed pipes, ductwork that need to be replaced, tired finishes, and the building systems generally are in excess of 20 years old. These are a few pictures that illustrate those items. This project will remodel the entire interior of the building, adding 2 leasable floors in the entrance atrium at levels 3 and 4. This project will require occupants to vacate the building while the renovations are underway. The original building systems are beyond their useful life, and Buildings and Grounds is addressing issues as they arise. This project will also provide electrical vehicle charging stations, a fresh new look inside, which will better serve the employees and the constituents in the future. the project planning, yeah, the project is in the planning stages, and the schematic design process has been contracted under 19 P01. We expect that the schematic design will be completed early this fall. The budget for this project is $4.9 million, excuse me, and is 100% state funded. Be happy to pause and answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I actually have a question, and I'm sure there are some others, but could you just give us a quick overview and count of how many agencies are in that building?
Kent LaFever for the record. I'd like to call upon Ron Cothran, Deputy over Buildings and Grounds.
This is Ward Patrick, from the Public Works Division Administrator for the record. In the 17 CIP, we did a study, $400,000 study is authorized by IFC. And that included a programming document, which is a list of all the agencies within that facility and their expected needs, with our staff architect as well as a consultant meeting with every agency. And so we would be able to provide that list to you and to your staff. I would point out that it's in the 30 to 40 range. And of course, I would point out that when the building originally opened in January of 1995, there were many more tenants. And so the idea with these big administrative buildings is when agency grows, agencies that are not general funded tend to move to lease space. So the state continues to reap the benefits of general funded agencies paying lower lease rates.
So with that, so I didn't hear a number. I know you didn't give all the agencies. Can you give me a roundabout number of how many agencies are in there?
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record, Administrator of the Public Works Division, 30 to 40 agencies. And we can provide a list of those. Thank you.
And with that being said, how much vacant space does state-owned space, how much of that is expected to be available in which to move agencies into?
Ward Patrick, for the record, there's very little state-owned space available on an ongoing basis. Our leasing section here, their first task is when there's a request for space by any state agency is let's look for state-owned space to move them into. So we have a very limited amount left in the Sawyer building, which they can't move into that, obviously. And then the Belrose building has a little bit of space right now, which is about 8,000 square feet. And as it turns out, DEM is looking at that now to be able to use that as a PPE, personal protective equipment storage area. So the total amount of unused space in Southern Nevada is less than 10,000 square feet outside of the Sawyer building.
Okay, so one of my concerns is that we're going to parcel out all these agencies, and then frankly, our constituents and community members are going to be driving all over town trying to figure out where they're supposed to go because they're not going to know that they're not down at 555 East Washington anymore. So can you talk a little bit about the plan to relocate the agency staff and that are currently occupying that building? And if future funding for renovation is approved and how that coordination would be done to limit the impacts to the agency and our citizens?
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. And as we talked about earlier, we had the budget reductions on, and this project was offered up as part of that in order to balance the general fund budget. So this project was originally to go through full design, and then we'd be talking here today likely about funding this somewhere around 90 or $100 million renovation project. And so during the planning stages of that project, we had identified a single location for all agencies to relocate into. I believe it was a Nevada Energy building that was the subject at that time. Of course, we didn't enter into any agreements, so there was no obligations for them to keep that space open and no payments expected by the state to keep that space open. But so again, as Senator Ratty pointed out, we have a small and mighty water system operational group. We also have a small and mighty leasing section, 3 people there as well, like our water operators. And so they're continuing to look for ingenious ways to look for spaces that are available. And so the Nevada Energy facility will likely not be available in 2 years from now. And so they'll continue to look for spaces like that. The benefit to the state here is that we're in a metropolitan area. There could be large facilities available, and so leasing services will continue to look for those. And if funded, there'll be a higher level of motivation to go find those spaces. Regarding coordination, I'd like to thank the committee for funding Ron Cothran and I to go to what they call NASFA, National Association of State Facility Administrators. We went to a little seminar in Portland, which was of great interest. There were 2 projects that some of the administrators there had completed that are very similar to this. One was in Portland itself, and the other was, I think, the Capitol building, if I'm not mistaken, in Idaho. And so they offered all their procedures and guidance how to make that process smoother. And we're very pleased to have been able to go there, make these contacts. And so we have some crib notes, but we can get their procedures from them to enable the smoothest transition possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Assemblywoman Chair Carlton has a comment. Thank you. Go ahead.
And thank you very much, Madam Chair, in recognizing that the legislature occupies that building also. And we've gotten pretty good at the virtual world, but we're all really ready to start having regular committee meetings and bringing people back together and having, face-to-face conversations when it's appropriate. And I'm looking at the time frame with this. So this would be a total evacuate, total gut rehab. So it's not a phased floor by floor approach. So the legislature, it's kind of unsaid here, is going to have to come up with a plan on where we're going to need to be, because we are a separate branch. We are a tenant. But I don't believe the executive branch has a responsibility to find a place for us. So I think we need to have on the record that this will impact the work of the legislature during this period of time.
Ward Patrick, for the record, I can comment on that, and I appreciate that. In the 19 legislative session, I believe Rick Combs had requested some funding to help with that, which there was $1 million that was requested and put into a bill. And so that seemed like a pretty wise thing at that time. And so I was kind of jogging my memory that might be of some support in order to help some of the transitions on this project, as we took a small step getting 1/3 of the design done, funding it with bond funding. It's likely the next 2 steps will be done to get the final design. And so this project is becoming more real. And so that might be an avenue to help with that process. And I understand what you're saying and agree that the legislature would be working on its own budgets, just like the executive branch would be coordinating through the budget process to get moving costs and lease costs in those budgets.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And to clarify, that was money that myself and Senator Woodhouse had a conversation about to make sure that if something did come up, that the legislature would have the resources. I'm pretty sure that money went back with everything that happened through the pandemic. I'll double check with fiscal staff, but I'm pretty sure we combed through everything and brought everything back that we could. So as we consider this particular project, I believe we're going to have to consider come up with some type of plan for the legislature to be able to address its business during this time period. I know there is another building out there that would need a significant remodel, but it may actually work for the legislature, so that might have to be part of the conversation. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. It's always good to have the institutional knowledge on these things. All right. Any additional questions from the committee? Okay, not seeing any. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Kent LaFever for the record. Next project we would like to present is PO2, the Advanced Planning and Seismic Stability Retrofit of the Heroes Memorial Annex here in Carson City. This is a picture on the upper left is a picture of the building under construction in 1920. And the picture on the lower right is a computer-generated model of this building. Next slide. This facility is located essentially directly west of the Capitol building across the street. And here is an aerial shot of that building. We'll be discussing the one on the bottom, the Heroes Memorial Annex. This is a historic structure for the Capitol complex and one of two remaining non-reinforced masonry buildings in the Capitol complex. The project will provide structural retrofits and interior remodeling to the neoclassical building, which was constructed in 1920. The annex, which sits behind the building and adjacent to it, was built in 1951. And it sports the Art Deco look common to this era. The interior renovations will make the building much more user-friendly for staff and guests. This is a building that will have to be vacated during the remodel phase. The budget for this building, for this portion of the planning, is $1.5 million and is 100% state funded. The schematic package of drawings was just completed and it is under review. And that was done under Project 19 PO2. I'd be happy to pause and answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions from the committee? Assemblywoman Gorlow, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Apologize, took a second to find my cursor. Can you explain more in detail of how these projects are recommended to be funded? You mentioned it was 100% state funded, so how's that working?
Lord Patrick, for the record, Administrator of the State Public Works Division. So the overall state funding in the CIP has $356 million of state funding. And so of which a small portion of that is this items that Matt Tuma referred to based on internal service fund and revenue bonds. And so that bond funding is paying for many of the projects. Now I point out that there's no general fund in here, which during the special session, the State Public Works Division removed approximately $100 million out of the 15 17 and 19 CIPs. There's no general fund in here. And so we share concerns that, that these certain projects have a useful life of less than 20 years. And I think even in testimony, at least conversations with the treasurer's office, they've stated that they allow, and I think it's even a federal ability to allow for $10 million of short-term financing within their model of their business. And so the Public Works Division and the Department of Administration has been coordinating with the GFO to identify those projects to ensure that those are going to get the right types of bonds attached to them.
Thank you. And follow-up, Chair?
Please, I get the cursor thing, please.
Thank you. And just one more quick question. Does the budget then include sufficient funding to support the anticipated debt service costs as well?
Lord Patrick, for the record, Mr. Tuma, the administrator of the Administrative Services Division, has addressed that for the internal service funds. And so to address that for the general obligation bonds, this falls back on the treasurer's affordability study, which relates to their projections of ad valorem tax, and ad valorem tax, which is property tax. And so relying on their pre-work and the property tax committee's pre-work, this is not in this budget, but this budget is supported by adequate property taxes as projected by that before said work.
Great. Thank you very much for the explanation.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions from the committee? Anyone? Seeing no hands, let's move forward.
Thank you, Kent LaFever for the record. The next project, group of projects we would like to address are the maintenance projects for the Department of Administration. And this is a list of projects that are proposed in this CIP. These projects include central plant renovation, temperature controls, elevator modernization, terminal unit replacements, data center upgrades, the diversion dam for the Marlette water system, a snow melt system, HVAC renovations, and electrical renovations. I would like to highlight one project in particular, 21M46, sorry, 21M46, which is the exterior renovation of the state capitol. In this picture, we have a original image of the Capitol building as it was constructed in 1871. And a few details of the building, the classic windows and the brickwork around them. Next slide, please. I'm sure you're all familiar with the location of this building. This is one of the landmarks in Carson City. And here's an aerial shot showing the Capitol complex. The Capitol building was constructed in 1871, as I just mentioned, and the annex was constructed in 1906. The classical Palladian windows employed by the architect Frederick de Longchamps designed the north and south wings that we see today in 1915. This project will clean the sandstone of the Capitol exterior, clean and repaint the window frames, refurbish rain gutters, downspouts, and some re-roofing needs. Fascia, soffits, and windows have not been thoroughly cleaned since 1979. This project is budgeted at $4.8 million and is 100% state funded. Be happy to pause and answer any questions.
Let's see. I'm trying to see if I see anybody. Anybody raising a hand? Senator Ratty, would you like to ask any more about the Marlette water system?
Sure. We're looking at the diversion dam controls upgrade piece. And I'm just curious of your assessment. Same question on Clark County, probably not Clark County, Carson City and Story County about whether or not they should be part of the solution. So if the analysis is, does this benefit all users, or these are benefits that are specific to the water system, how does the diversion dam controls upgrade fit into that analysis?
Ward Patrick, for the record, Administrator of Public Works Division. And so a lot of the answer is those same items, although it's very clear that on the Hobart Dam. So the Hobart Dam, is integral part of the system, but necessary for fisheries and recreation and all those big acres of beautiful alpine lake area. And so now we're talking about this smaller dam, and so a diversion dam. And so the portion of this project is for safety around that diversion dam. As members of the committee that have been there, and I believe we've walked across the top of that concrete structure that show that there's no hand railings on that, and it certainly doesn't meet any type of code regarding rise and run of the steps to get across that. And it doesn't meet code. Again, there'd be a railing requirement for code as well. So this project would address that. This project also addressed safety around the perimeter of all that with fencing to keep the public out. So there is a portion of this that relates to controls and operating the system. And so I understand your question, because that could be the part that was shared. And I would just rely on our answer previously is the current customers are believe this may price them out of the market for the Marlette Lake water system.
This is Matthew Tuma, administrator from ASD. I would add on to that as we maintain this system and as we work on this system, delivery of water to just the current ratepayers at what they utilize requires a lot less sort of maintenance than what we're kind of proposing in these projects. And so one of the key aspects of this project as well, I would say, is stewardship of state property, the water rights that we own, and making sure that we're not just serving the water right needs of the customers right now, but also being proper stewards to allocate that water appropriately, to understand exactly how much of that resource we have, and making sure that we're being the best stewards of this resource for the state that we can possibly be.
And Madam Chairman, Ward Patrick, for the record, I would also want to make sure everybody's aware that we had fiscal issues in 2019, which was, for us, it was a major topic of the legislative session in 2019. Fiscal year 19, we were short funding by half of the revenue. We're attempting to find new customers, which includes Tumwa. And for fiscal year 20, we entered in 21, we entered into agreement with Carson City, and we exceeded expectations of revenue for fiscal year 20. And so we're still monitoring. The jury's still out on this fiscal year. We've had some challenges. But so as a result of that good funding source, we brought to IFC's attention that we'd like to do a work program in the past, and it's been approved to do a master plan, a rate study, evaluation of the water rights, and try to expand the customer base. And so expanding the customer base should allow future projects to be, put a lot more pressure on 3 future customers as opposed to the 2 existing customers to participate in these types of projects. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. I appreciate it. I think the momentum, as you say, from the history is headed in the right direction, and I don't want to rock the boat over a small project, but I do think it's an ongoing conversation that we need to continue to have.
Thank you very much. Additional questions from the committee? So,
Madam
yes, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I know on this list that we had, we did have one more question on the warehouse renovation, and
Yes,
I don't
please, go
think Mr.
ahead.
Patrick or his team need to go into any depth with this. I just have a couple of quick questions if we could get those answered. So it's my understanding in reading the backup documents on this, that this would be, that this actually, the funding of this, I think is kind of an issue, how we're actually going to fund the renovations of this warehouse. So if you could elaborate along that lines for me, please.
Matthew Tuma, for the record, administrator for ASD, be happy to expand on that. And this is one of those projects where the budget process and the budget building process begins in February of the previous year. And so it's really kind of an evolution of thinking and constantly sort of updating with new data points as we get more information. When we started this project, typical for internal service funds, we look at financing that project. We start with looking at a general fund loan and look at the feasibility of that and sort of move through the planning process. As we've kind of moved through the last fiscal year, FY20 and FY21, we've realized significant savings as well as additional revenue in purchasing fees and revenues. What's really kind of made the mark for us as we've kind of gotten past halfway through this fiscal year and really getting done with the Q3 through FY21, as well as looking at some declining expenses that will go into the next biennium for purchasing. It does appear that when we close out FY21, we will have sufficient funding to fund this project entirely within the FY22-23 biennium. When we started this project, we were looking at some term of financing and getting the project done during the next biennium and starting to pay that back in FY24 and beyond. But it looks like we can actually reduce what purchasing collects from FY21 to FY22, as well as fund this project in its entirety. And so I think as we get closer to closing FY21, that's when we would want to work with GFO staff and LCB staff to put the appropriate expenditure authority to fund this project. But we're looking at funding it entirely with internal service funds in the budget account and not seeking a financing for this $1 million project.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And you hit upon the expenditure side of it. So you'll be submitting something for your budget to show the expenditure side of this in the future. Is that in the process?
So we've submitted our calculations on reserve calculations to show that there's appropriate funding there, and we'll work with the GFO and LCB staff on whatever's appropriate to put forward that expenditure when deemed appropriate. I don't get to be the boss in deciding those things, so I'll take the cue from GFO and LCB staff on when that's appropriate.
I totally understand. There are some things beyond all of our pay grades. We always have to go to the next guy up the ladder. So I appreciate that. That's my only question, Madam Chair. It takes care of that particular list of projects that we had questions on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I don't believe I see any additional questions, so I think we can move on to the Office of the Military. Am I correct?
Excellent. Ward Patrick, for the record, I would like to introduce Major General Barry, the Adjutant General of the State of Nevada, to give an introduction to these projects. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Major General Andre Berry, the Adjutant General for the Nevada National Guard, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about our request for state funding in support of updating, improving, and expanding our facilities and our site operations. The 2020 to 2035 Nevada Air National Guard Strategic Plan requires Nevada to grow and transform into a modern, and agile, and relevant force by 2035 in order to deploy, fight, and win in a complex multi-domain environment and to defend the homeland. Just to give you an update, our force is extremely healthy. And in terms of meeting our federal mission, 4 of our units deployed around the world in 2020, and our signal unit is currently deployed downrange. And in terms of our homeland or state mission, we had the largest state activation in the history of the Nevada National Guard in 2020. From the COVID-19 mission to fighting wildfires to civil unrest, the Nevada National Guard was always ready and was always there. And in terms of our state partnership, we have a best practice in the South Pacific with Tonga and Fiji, and recently received additional increased federal funds to expand our program. And we are hopeful that in the near future, we will gain an additional state partner in the South Pacific, which is a strategic area in terms of our national defense. We were recently notified by the National Guard Bureau that we will see an increase in personnel in our signal battalion, and we are postured and positioned to grow in our force structure. One of our major and our biggest challenges as an organization is it's hard to grow our mission and our personnel wise unless we can grow our infrastructure. The Nevada National Guard cannot be as effective because of the shortfalls in facilities and infrastructure required to support the soldiers of the Nevada Army National Guard. They are severely restricted in how quickly they can activate, mobilize, and adapt to a changing state and federal mission because of the lack of training and facilities. My installations and environment staff work very closely with Mr. Ward, Patrick, and his state public works division staff to develop the projects which are presented here today to support us in our growing organization. I've also worked closely with Governor Sisolak and his staff in gaining support on these projects. Historically, the Nevada National Guard has relied upon predominantly federal funding in order to build our current and future requirements. We've received several $1 million of MILCON over the last 9 years. But for future MILCON projects over the next 10 years, 4 projects will be funded with nearly all federal funds. And that is why the Nevada Army National Guard is requesting more state funding than typically requested during one CIP. We have already been told that there will be severe cuts in funding to the Department of Defense. But I reiterate, because we are a growth state and we do outstanding at recruiting, we're in the top 5 in the nation in recruiting. We have the ability to grow if we can support that growth. This CIP, this 21 CIP list contains 21 projects with 8 in the Reno Carson area, 5 in Carlin, and 9 in Las Vegas. We thank you for the ability to educate and communicate what we are working to do to be a best practice. But while many of the other military units around the nation right now are decreasing, are losing mission, are losing funding and resources, your Nevada National Guard, Nevada Army National Guard is postured, ready, positioned to grow, and has the ability to. I work on a regular basis with the Chief of the National Guard Bureau and the Director of the Army National Guard to tell them we want to grow, we have the ability to grow, and we are positioned to grow. Our one stumbling block is to make sure we have those facilities, infrastructure to make that happen. Anything that you can do to help us facilitate that growth and to acquire more missions, that will be not just a benefit to the Nevada Army National Guard. I believe it also is a benefit to the quality of the state of Nevada. And in a time of a downturn, we will do our part to add value to grow. Thank you for that. And just always remember this, the Nevada National Guard, always ready, always there. Those are my opening remarks.
Thank you, sir, and I appreciate that, and thank you so much for your service during this pandemic here. You and the National Guard have been instrumental in helping us get through this, so we all appreciate your service now and all the time. And with that, I think the first question I see on the list is Assemblywoman Gorlow again, and thank you so much, as we have many members that are in and out presenting bills, so go ahead, please. And then we will go to Senator Ratty.
Thank you, Chair Dondera-Loop. And I also want to echo my thanks, kind of say ditto to what Chair Dondera-Loop said about your service and the National Guard. You have just been invaluable during the pandemic, and we are truly grateful for your service. Could you explain real quick about the modifications to this project as recommended are required to complete the necessary planning efforts for this project, and how will those efforts be funded?
Which project?
Ward Patrick, for the record, if I may,
Yes.
Adjutant General. Thank you. So there was an anticipation for this, the first project on this list, which is the Washoe County Training Center up in Stead, Nevada. There was an anticipation that this project could do some of the original planning, the first third of the planning we refer to as schematic design throughout these hearings, prior to the CIP hearing and this approval. And so therefore, the schematic design is not, just for clarity, is not included in the CIP book. And so we've been working with the GFO to develop a governor's amendment to add that work back in. And so I would like the Guard to comment on this, but there's $711,495 of funding that I believe the Guard currently has or is soon to have. And so that would be planned to be added into the project. And so that the Guard calls that type A services. Public Works largely calls that schematic design. And so then there's an equal amount of bond funding that would be planned to go with that, $711,495. And then of course, on all these projects, there's a federal funded amount, and then there's a state funded amount to match. Then there's also what we call non-eligible costs. These non-eligible costs include project management and inspection fees, include plan checking, advertising, printing, any fees that are not within the type A services. And so you'll see throughout the brief remaining time for the presentation, there's also off-site costs that are ineligible, as well as land and real property purchase. So getting to your question, how will it be funded? Thank you. In response to prior RFIs, the division has made a modification to project 19M02 to reduce the contingency on that $27 million project from approximately $2 million to $1 million, to approximately $3 million to $2 million, leaving $1 million available, leaving $1 million available. And so this decision is caveated or based on the fact that that MO2 project is going to remain above $10 million. And so we apologize that we missed that on that project, but we have a policy that projects over $10 million have a contingency of 10%, not 15%. And so that difference in that, I'm calling it a technical adjustment, would create $1 million of bond funding within the governor's original recommendation to cover the $711,495 of state funding, plus the ineligible costs that are currently believed to be in the $41,000 range.
Thank you. And you mentioned that there were some federal funds, and I believe you said it was a match. Is that a 1-to-1 match, a 2-to-1? And how does the state get reimbursed with those federal funds?
Thank you. So the match is, we're talking about the Washington County Training Center. So this is a project proposed at 50% matching. And so, it is 1-to-1, plus ineligible costs are paid for by the state. So regarding, reimbursement, what we'll be talking about here now is just the cash flow during the course of the project. So as monthly payments come in, those are required by the federal government, as in these projects in this book and prior projects, for the state to pay them up front with state funding. And so then that reimbursement happens relatively immediately, within days of proof of state payment. And if there's any follow-up questions on that, this is Ward Patrick for the record. And I might have missed something, but please help me out, Evie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Senator Ratty, did I hear your voice?
Yep, I do just have a couple quick follow-ups. So, Mr. Patrick, I think it's a little unusual to have both planning and construction in the same biennium. Do those both need to be approved to meet the requirements of the federal funding? Is that what we're doing here?
That is correct, and thank you for that. It's anticipated that the federal award for construction will be in October of 2022, or at least in that fiscal year. And the National Guard Bureau anticipates that a notice to proceed for construction will be within 1 year of appropriation. For the purpose of grant eligible costs, the Guard is receiving 18 million of federal MILCON funding for this 55,000 square foot addition to the Washoe County Training Center. The project is 50-50 split, where the state share of construction is 18 million. Ineligible costs, I went through PMI, plan checking, advertising, printing, and offsite costs. As MILCON funding is approved by Congress annually with the FIDEP, the intent of Congress is that those funds are obligated with the current contract, the construction contract, and the notice to proceed within the respective fiscal year. In order for the State Public Works and the Guard to meet the timeline, design services for this project need to start as soon as possible. Initiation of the design project is critical as soon as possible, and it needs to be started as soon as possible due to the overall time constraints of this project from design through construction notice to proceed. Achieving notice to proceed for construction by September 30 of 2023, and then the key part, this is probably the most of the answer here, will result in the Guard being more competitive for receiving future federal MILCON funding, resulting in more federal funds being brought to the state of Nevada in the short and medium term. It's true, construction funding will not be spent in the state fiscal year 22 or 23. But this date for a construction notice to proceed of September 30th, 2023 can only be achieved by if bidding is initiated 6 months before that date. So we'll be like right here today in the middle of the next session having hearings, and we'll need to have that money in the bank in order to initiate the bidding process. So we understand the statute NRS 341.083 that refers to, when practicable, do the design the session before and do construction after that. And so with some accolades to Lori Chatwood, I kind of relay some comments that we shared. The once famous and now legendary Lori Chatwood, the prior debt manager for the treasurer's office, stated that it's good planning to commit future affordability, not current affordability, but future affordability for this purpose. Thank you.
Yeah, so if that makes sense to me, I think I get it. And so I think if we were to divide it up, then the bottom line of what I hear you saying is we would be less competitive. And because of the uncertainty of it being in the middle of next session, that timing, while in theory is feasible, is really not practical. And so to maintain the competitiveness of the project, we need to do it now.
Correct. Lord Patrick, for the record.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do not believe, Senator Severs Ganser, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Dondero Loop. This brings to mind Northern Nevada Veterans Home. Remember, I think we paid for some of it in advance or commit funds, and then we're reimbursed following. And I understand the timeline of this is that it would be in the middle of next session prior to the approval. But I believe that we were able to construct that and fund it. Is that correct?
Regarding the Veterans Home, it's true that was the Veterans Home in Northern Nevada on 36 Battleborn Way, which is, Nevada is the 36th state in the Union. I would offer that the planning for the project was to pay out those, pay invoices coincidentally. So the state portion and the federal portion would basically be paid for coincidentally. However, the Veterans Home administration allows the state to pay for the whole building up front and then later get reimbursed. So that is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is, I think the original question was generated because of an earlier response that was just referring to the monthly business of the state paying the invoice originally and the federal government reimbursing them on a monthly basis, which is somewhat different from the Northern Nevada Veterans Home.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Additional questions from the committee? Okay, I don't see any. And so Mr. Patrick, if you'd like to go to project, I believe we're on CO7.
So this is a organizational parking lot. And so this, you can see here, we got a vicinity map. So this is instead Nevada, kind of in the middle of the airport out there. Harry Reid Training Center, which is North Arena. So the point of this project is you see this organizational parking lot, which is for the use of the guard. And they also have, as you see here, personal owned vehicle parking. But this is for the use of the guard itself, not their employees and committed soldiers. So here we see the location for the organizational parking lot. Well, the current location of this parking lot is kind of in the mouth of that V-shaped building called the Washoe County Armory, and so it's in the mouth of that. That's the current organizational parking. So within this CIP, we're planning on adding that addition, the Washoe County Training Center, and then later we'll be talking about the maintenance hangar. So those two buildings are going to be constructed within that red dash line. So therefore, the parking lot needs to be relocated. This is a $1.4 million project, 75% federal funding, and it's just planned to be a gravel top parking area with fencing. And I'd be available for any questions.
Madam Chair, if I could ask a question on this one, please. I believe you're on mute, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. I could not find you to call on you. Thank you.
That's okay. So on this one, I guess because of the way I think you originally looked at it, you thought it was going to need to be a secure facility, and we have a secure facility allowance that needs to be included with that, but I believe that's changed, so that allowance won't necessarily be needed. Am I correct in that? Could you confirm that for me, please?
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. And so after we responded to that comment about the allowance, and it certainly is not needed for this project. However, I understand that the federal funding is available, and if here now, and so if Mr. Clayton Chapel could respond to that. So it may be in the state's best interest to continue to fund it at the current level within the project, just to assure successful implementation, even though just to match the required state funding with what I believe is already in hand federal funding. Clayton?
For the record, Clayton Chapel, Director of Installation and Environment for the Nevada Army National Guard. Ward Patrick is correct. Federal funding is available. And we, with each of our projects, I think part of the question was in regards to anti-terrorism force protection. Each of our projects have an element of that we need to design to, and it's already incorporated into a federal, it's already incorporated into a facility that has fencing and security fencing in there. But the federal funds are available.
And thank you very much, Madam Chair, but I guess I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around. We don't need to include that 14%, but yet we're going to go ahead and include it because we got it. And is that so we don't have to change everything and go back and start all over again? Will that 14% be clawed back? How mechanically, how will this work?
Technically, we use those secure facility allowances primarily if there's a holdup of the general contractor accessing the site on a daily basis, that they might be interrupted over an hour every day. And so in this case, the general contractor and the subcontractors, well, we'll need to go through, I think Colonel Chapel is referring to the initial screening processes to get on site, but there would be, get on a list and flash your identification for complete identification and allowed to be on the site. There's not an hour delay in getting in and getting out. And so it would be our preference, since money is available, to keep it in the project. As a business decision, if the project needs that funding, it would be there. And whatever pleases the committee, we could remove that funding. I'm not sure what would happen to the Fed portion. Certainly there would be this 25% of the project, of that savings, would be savings in the bond authority. Thank you.
So I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole on this one because we are technically getting in the weeds a little bit here. But so I'm understanding you, if there is extra money, then if we don't have to use that 14%, it would stay with the project. And then if we end up having any overages or change orders, anything like that, those dollars could go ahead and be used for that. They're not strictly for the security allowance. Am I understanding you correctly?
Ward Patrick, for the record, Administrator of Public Works Division. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, it would stay in the project. It's not solely for secure facility. And so it could be used as a contingency for any other needs of the project. And then of course, if there's project savings on this project through IFC processes, certainly the state money could be moved to other appropriate projects and possibly the Fed portion.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Patrick. That's what I like to hear, that we're going to have some flexibility if it's already funded. I'm pretty good with that. So that takes care of my questions on this particular item. Madam Chair, I do have questions on the next one, but I'd be happy to yield to other members if they have any questions on this one.
Okay, we'll check and see if we have any hands in the air. And if I'm missing you, please holler out. I don't see any. Chair Carlton, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next, I guess the next one I would have questions about, Mr. Patrick, is CO8, the Navy Operational Support Center. If you want to give us, I love the way you want to talk about all your projects and how great they are, but if you could give us a very brief overview of this, you know, I think the obvious questions are going to be the purchase of this property versus leasing it. So if you would just give us a real brief overview, and then I'll ask my questions.
Thank you. So quickly looking at our slides, this is also in Stead, but notice it's in Stead, Nevada, south of the airport. And so very strategic purchase by the National Guard, and they're very elated that this could be a part of their project, and they can elaborate on how strategic that is for them. And so you see the aerial view, and then you go a little farther, you see a little detail, a little more closer in the aerial view. And so this is a $4.4 million project, of which it's a planned to be a 75-25% split of eligible costs. And I'm eagerly awaiting your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. I always like working with you. So let's talk about actually purchasing this project, I mean, I know it's important to the mission. So if the Guard would like to make any statements on how important this is to their mission, we'd be more than happy to have that on our record. But, and after that, I'd like to really talk about, it will be purchasing it. I believe it's owned by NSHE right now, the University of Nevada, Reno. So the difference between purchasing it and then if we don't, you know, times are tough, we don't have the money to purchase, what are the options for a long-term lease?
For the record, this is Clayton Chapel, Nevada National Guard, Installations and Environment. We currently have a lease, or we started the lease actually yesterday with the university. And I think it's projected for 3 years, depending on the purpose of this facility. One of the issues that we have from a Guard perspective is we're limited in the amount of federal dollars we can bring people to expand or do upgrades to the facility. So with the state purchasing it, then we'll be able to bring additional federal dollars into the state to make some modifications and upgrades to the building as required.
So you've currently already entered into a lease. So we've already sort of started the process, and now the decision point is the best way forward as far as purchasing it goes. Do I understand you correctly?
Yeah, we started in the lease. As Major General Barry pointed out, we are receiving additional soldiers. We're receiving an additional unit, the signal company, and we needed a place to house them. So the quickest and the portion that we needed was forwarded, and we knew the university was releasing this facility or giving away, selling this facility. So we entered a lease with them on the federal side in order to secure some square footage for the housing of this unit. Plus, it's across the street from training lands, which is we're already housing a soldier up there. That we have equipment up there, training land that we utilize quite effectively and quite often. So yes.
Thank you very much. And I'm not sure who might have their microphones on, but I'm getting a little bit of feedback if everyone could. I just want to make sure we have a very clear recording for the record. So
thank you, Chair Carlton. I was going to ask the same. Mr. Patrick, could you mute your microphone? Well, thank you. That might help a little bit with the feedback. Thank you, Chair Carlton. Go ahead. You're on
Thank you,
mute.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that answers my questions. We've heard what the need of the guard is, and they're being proactive and trying to address their needs. So that would answer my questions on that one. And hate to be a pest, but I do have some questions on the storage hangar issue. So when we're ready to get to that one, I do have a question on that. Thank you.
I would suggest to go ahead and ask those questions now, and then because I think they'll probably coincide nicely with what you've just said. So go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, for the latitude. I appreciate that. So, Mr. Patrick, C10, if you'd give us the same type of brief overview, and then I'll ask my question. Thank you.
Lord Patrick, for the record. This is a C10, the aircraft storage hangar and site work project at the Harry Reid Training Center back in Stead, Nevada. And here we see the aerial, which again, I referred to it that it's in what I'm calling the mouth of this V-shaped building or extended to the east side there. And so the budget for this project is $6.4 million, professional services approximately $674,000. And the federal funding is $3.65 million, and the requested state funding is $2.8 million for this a facility that's intended to be 16,355 square feet. That's I believe, to store 3 Black Hawk helicopters. Ready for any questions? Thank you.
So, okay, thank you, Mr. Patrick. So is my understanding that part of this project, we would be reimbursed with federal funds for the planning efforts on this? How does that work, and what are the timeframes on it?
Lord Patrick, for the record, this is again a little bit of a misnomer. There is the reimbursement, as I stated on the prior project, is about the monthly billing process. So certainly, if there's money left over in the project, it will be able to be reallocated to future CIPs. But there is not intended to be any of this funding that the state pays to be reimbursed / replaced with federal funding. Thank you for that.
And I apologize, Mr. Patrick. Something froze, or I had a glitch. I lost the last couple sentences. So did I understand you to say it's not reimbursed?
Any reference to this project regarding reimbursement is about just the monthly billing process. So when this project is over and say it uses all the funding that's in this project from the state, approximately $2.8 million. When that is spent, it will stay spent. It will not be reimbursed.
Okay, I think I've got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Patrick, if you would quickly go through PO5, and then we'll go to the questions on that.
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. Project PO5 is the general instruction building. This is a planning project. That's the P in the project number. This is at the Floyd Etzel Training Center, which is in Southern Nevada. And as you can see here, there's all those various installations down in the lower left-hand corner of your slide here, which there's just endless, there's just many buildings that have been constructed there. And then up at the right-hand corner, which is the northeast, you see the Speedway Readiness Center that was recently completed. Now the red box is where this GIB building, this general instruction building, is planned to be located. And so, as we're all aware, this is out near the Speedway. The budget for this project is $5.4 million, of which it's primarily professional services costs. This is planned to be 100% federally funded project of eligible costs. However, there are ineligible costs of $1.4 million. This project will take the design through construction documents for the building, barracks, dining, and support facilities. It's anticipated that a construction project of approximately $58 million will be requested in the 2023 CIP. Available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assemblywoman Carlton, did you want to continue on this subject?
Yes. Yes, if I may, thank you. I'm very curious because, and especially this one, this is kind of in my neighborhood. So first question that's kind of off the wall, Mr. Patrick. Floyd Edsel Training Center. Who's Floyd Edsel? And are we talking, is this because it's by the Speedway and it was an Edsel? I don't understand. Who is Floyd Edsel? Just my own personal curiosity.
For the record, Clayton Chapel, Nevada Army National Guard. Floyd Edsel was a previous tag in the late 1970s into the 80s. I think it was one of the last Army generals that we had as tag, and it was named after him.
Okay.
The
all right.
Speedway was, yes, the new building that's out there is called the Speedway Readiness Center, and it is because it's near the racetrack there at Las Vegas.
Okay, thank you. I always want to understand how things are named. It's nice to get that. So, this is an instructional facility. So if you could just elaborate on how this facility will help you meet your mission. And, I love seeing projects like this because I see jobs for the folks that live in Southern Nevada. So if you would just elaborate on how this will help you meet your mission in the future.
For the record, this is David Paxton, through Madam Chairman to Assemblywoman. So yes, this facility is our regional training institute. Currently, they are running operations out of one of our readiness centers, but you can think of them kind of as a college campus for the Army. And their mission is to train up our soldiers academically, and that directly impacts the readiness of our units and how trained up our soldiers are and ready to deploy or be activated. And so that's what the mission in that facility is.
Well, thank you. It's nice to know we're going to have another educational institution out there performing this work. So, Madam Chair, I think that pretty much takes care of most of the questions that I have. I know we're going to be going into the maintenance projects, but I will stand back and let other folks ask questions. Thank you so much for the latitude.
Thank you kindly, Chair Carlton. Others with questions? I am not seeing any hands, so we will move on. Go ahead, please.
Kent Lefevre for the record. This is a list of maintenance projects for the military. And these projects include electrical circuiting, lighting, parking lots, HVAC systems, restroom and shower remodels, water heater replacements, hot water systems and transformer replacements. I'd like to highlight one project 21M25, which is the remodel of the restrooms at the Floyd Edsel Training Center. Next slide. This project will refurbish the restrooms and showers of this facility, including upgrades for ADA. The project, the building was constructed back in 1998. So we're seeing that these facilities have aged and need to be refreshed. This project will refurbish the restrooms, again, as I mentioned, and bring them up to current ADA standards. The budget for this project is $1.8 million, and the federal match is $880,000. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions on that particular piece? Okay, seeing none, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to move forward then to the Department of the Military Economic Development Projects. This is a list of economic development projects. And the reason that they're called economic development projects is because they don't rise to the test of critical maintenance, but they still bring significant other funding. This list outlines 7 projects that fit this description. They range from door replacements, loading docks, lighting, and fences. I'd like to highlight one of these projects for you, 21E05, which is the security fence for the Floyd Etzel Training Center. Next slide. So this green dot in the middle of the screen and the green line that goes generally northeast from there is the location of this fence. This will provide security for the southern portion of the state land and the guard's operation. The fence will follow the Centennial Parkway right-of-way, roughly from I-15 up to the Speedway. The budget for this project is $1.189 million. And what's great about these economic projects is they bring a lot of other money to the state. The federal portion of this project is $1,113,000. I'd be happy to take any questions on that.
Madam Chair, if I could ask a question?
I'm sorry, is that Chair Carlton?
Yes, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for clarifying what the economic development thing is. I think we saw this a number of sessions ago that we used this code. But we haven't seen it in recent sessions, so I really couldn't remember what we were classifying as economic development. So thank you for clarifying that. And I really appreciate E05, the fencing one you were just talking about. But then I'm looking at some of the others and it's almost like a 50-50. And one of them actually has more state general obligation funds than federal funds. I believe it's E02 is the doors. So I don't want, I mean, we really don't need to get into each individual one, but I'm just wondering, you know, since it's more state funds than federal funds, what was the criteria for that to be on the list as I'm looking at some of the other ones? And also the patio at the Armory 07 is more state funds than federal funds. So it seems like there's a couple in there that sort of go the other way.
For the record, Clayton Chapel, Nevada Army National Guard, you are correct, ma'am. The support codes that are at those particular sites that you just mentioned are 50% support. And then you add the State Public Works Board PM&I fees, which unfortunately are not reimbursed on the federal as we go through the CIP process. And so that's where you can see a little bit more on a couple of those projects. It just depends on the activity and what kind of support are at those sites. And it's currently 50-50 at both those locations.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. And I know these are important projects that need to be done, but they just didn't rise to the level of making that tier one decision. But because of the match, it's still worth doing it because we'll be bringing in money alongside the state money. So that's basically the idea behind them all.
For the record, Clayton Chapel, that is correct, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure we had a very clear record. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Additional questions from the committee? Okay, then with that, we'll move forward to Department of Veteran Services. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Ward Patrick for the record. Nevada Department of Veteran Services. First project here is the 21C11 Cemetery Expansion Supplemental Funding. This is supplemental to the 19C03 project. So on this aerial photography here, you see the existing cemetery, and you see this red rectangle located in the southwest portion. And so this is certainly not to scale. It's a broader, it's a bigger area than that. And so then you see this is all in the sagebrush area, undeveloped. And so this project will include some development for in-ground cremations as well as additional columbariums. But again, this is to support the 19C03 project. It's $4.1 million approximately, of which on this particular project, this is, as these cemetery projects go, this is 100% federal funded except for ineligible costs. And in this case, there is a reimbursable amount. So ineligible costs will not be reimbursed, but this state funding amount is put in this project to allow for the design to be completed. So some of that $600,000 is for project management and inspection, and then part of that funding is for just to do the design, which will be reimbursed. So the intent behind this project 21C11 is to get that reimbursable state funding in this project. So that was, although known now, wasn't included in the 19C03 project. So this is key to the success of the 19C03 project. It was considered to add funding from the state into the 19C03 project if it existed. And there was no means available to get state funding into the 19C03 project. And so it was determined that it would be best to develop a supplemental funding project to get this additional funding for the design. So the second area of dependency of these two projects is that this brings this up to the VA's required capacity to in this project, provide a 10-year supply of the internments within the project. So I would like to go over some of the intricacies and challenges of grant funding. You know, we've been answering fairly simple questions about FEMA funding, and certainly the complexities also exist in the military area, but there's a web, a maze, or a puzzle to be solved in order to get these cemetery projects funded appropriately. And I really commend Director Kat Miller for taking the ingenuity and the foresight to make this original request. And so I'd like to go over some of those intricacies. So there's a web of state items that need to happen logistically. And there's a much more complex and sometimes speedy web of logistics that goes on with the VA, with the cemetery grant program. They've got an acronym for that, and I'll leave that off the record. Certainly, regarding the veteran cemetery, the grant needs to be requested. And as I understand it, what I know is that the veteran cemetery group, they issue data sheets to determine how long their existing inventory of internment are going to last in the three areas of columbariums, basically double caskets or crypts, and then the in-ground cremations. And so they go through this process every year and submit this to the federal government. And so Ms. Miller and Director Miller, with her foresight, she asked for these CIP projects, I believe, 5 or 6 years before we certainly don't want to run out. I've heard many legislators agree to that on the record. So certainly that's very much the case. And so the Nevada Department of Veteran Services request these projects both in the CIP and at the federal level. So making that application is the first step. So then what happens after that is when these data sheets look like there's 3 to 4 years of available capacity left, it starts moving up on the priority list for the VA. And so they issue this priority list every September. But if you're in that 3 to 4 year range, they would ask, do you have matching funds? Do you have this design money that you'll be reimbursed for? And so when you've got 3 to 4 years of capacity or less predicted, and when you've certified that this state money is ready to go do the design, the VA issues a letter that we call a plan to award letter. This is what the VA calls it, a plan to award letter. And so that at that point, the priority list has the state of Nevada in this particular facility, the Boulder Sitters Memorial Cemetery, as a priority 1. Then logistically, the state needs to accept that offering, and then the design process begins, and the federal government, the VA, really gets involved in this whole design process. It leads to the permitting plans examination and bidding, and then it's got to be bid and ready to award before the state gets this award letter. So although we know what we applied for, and usually these award letters come back as what the application was, but then that enables construction to begin and then opening up the facility. And so I'd like to answer any questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking to see if we have questions. Assemblywoman Carlson, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I'm trying to figure out how the 19 and the 21 project sort of work together, because I know we had conversations about this in 19. So is the receipt of the federal money or the funding authority for the 19 project is tied in and dependent upon part of the 2021 CIP project recommendation? Do we have a little ribbon and bow on this one?
Thank you for the question, Ward Patrick, Administrator for the Public Works, for the record. The 19 CO3 project requires a state-funded design that is missing from 19 CO3. Although this is required, it was not known at the time that project was submitted and ultimately approved. And of course, the same thing happened on the 19 CO4 project at Fernley, which has since been corrected with division with the Department of Veteran Services funding. For the Fernley project, we're in the middle of that design process that I described. So the full intent of 10-year build out includes the construction funding from the 19 CO3 as well as 21 C11. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Patrick. So we didn't miss something. We just didn't know we needed to get there. It wasn't part of the discussion.
Yes, we didn't know we needed it at the time. And now
Okay, no, that's fair. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss something that caused an issue. So I appreciate that. So because we have the 19 project and we have the 21 project, do we need to keep them separate as far as the fiscal components of these goes? How do we track them? Or is there a way we're going to have to put them together? What do we know what the requirements are so that we make sure that we can get this done the right way, knowing we've done a piece in 2 different legislative sessions that are now going to be tied together?
Thank you for the question, Ward Patrick, for the record. And this has been in prior discussions, and so this hopefully is not too new in news. But when we do this agreement with a consultant to do the design, we'll have 1 contract with 2 funding lines. And when we do the contract for construction, we'll have, well, excuse me, for the professional service agreement, we're going to take that out of 21 C11 because that's where the design money is. But when you do construction, we'll have a dual funding line construction agreement. So there will not be a need to do any makeshift or shifting of any funding out of the 19 project. The Public Works Division has issued contracts in the past that we're not combining the projects at this level. That would be if the legislature chose to do that. But at our level, we have the authority to have dual funding line construction projects. And we've done that in the past, and that's the way we would proceed with this one. So there would be no need, in my opinion, to modify the 19 CO3 project to allow this project to be the supplemental funding. An example of that would be the DMV project. We had a completion project on the DMV, and so we added the dual funding line in South Reno. Another example is the Speedway Readiness Center. When we had the sewer issue, we got additional funding in the next session for completion, and we added a dual funding line to the construction agreement. And law actually allows adding that scope to a project in those cases, but in this case, the whole scope would be bid as one bid document.
Okay, thank you very much. And Madam Chair, if I could ask one more, kind of more on a, if I could take a bit of personal privilege on this particular item. The Veteran Cemetery is very near and dear to my heart. Mr. Patrick, could you go back to the original photo that you had, sort of the layout of the cemetery for me, please? If you could share that photo with the committee. Yes, thank you. That's the perfect one. So committee members, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the latitude. I'll only take a couple minutes, I promise. So in the center where you see the circle and there's that little black dot that's just above the red dotted, in that circle there, that's a roundabout. In the center of that roundabout is a tree. It's the Skivington tree. That tree was planted by the father of a young man from Las Vegas who went missing in action in Vietnam. And it was planted outside of the Camp Post building, the original state office building in downtown Las Vegas. And when that building was being torn down, my husband took on the project, and naturally I got sucked into it also, to move that tree from downtown Las Vegas out the highway to the Veterans Cemetery and put it right there in the middle of that little roundabout. So that tree's kind of special. And right about the time we planted that tree, the remains of the young man that went missing were found. So it's a very interesting story. But on what I really wanted to go with this is I cannot thank the folks who work at that cemetery enough for everything that they do. They are truly angels in all that they do. The groundskeepers, the folks who take care of everything out there. You know, they're with people when they're at one of the worst moments of their lives because they're burying someone they love. And they do such a fantastic job. And I just wanted to make sure that I gave them recognition on the record for all the work that they do out there. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the latitude.
Thank you very much, Chair Carlton. And I would agree. While it's a very sad place to be many times, it's also a very quiet and serene place to be. So thank you for that story. Any additional questions or comments about this? Well, Mr. Patrick, I think we're almost at the end. I think we're on project PO3. Am I right?
Thank you. Always right, Madam Chairman, always right.
Oh, thank you. I'll make sure and tell my children that. Thank you.
Ward Patrick for the record, Administrator for the Public Works Division. This is project 21P03 Advanced Planning for the remodel in addition to the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home. Here's a vicinity map. And so you see just to the south of that is the cemetery. I'm not identified, but that's where it's located. Next slide. Here's an aerial view of the veterans home. It's a 180 bed veterans home and was built approximately 20 years ago. Next. The budget for this project is approximately 4.2 million. And with these veterans, cemetery, with these projects with the veterans, this is also a 65%. For the home, there's 65% federal funding and therefore 35% state funding. The scope of this project would be to complete the feasibility study, programming, design through construction documents, so complete design and plan checking for the remodel in addition to the facility. The remodel will remodel 82,000 square feet of the existing facility and have an addition of 14,400. There will be some site development costs and some off-site improvements. It's estimated that this project going into the next session would have a request for approximately $43 million. Available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Chair Carlton, I do think you had a question on this. And I don't see another hand raised at this time, so I'll.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I just want, as we look at the Veterans Home, just wanted to get a couple of questions on the record. I noticed that we're going to be going from 180 beds currently down to 120. And I believe the thought process behind that in this renovation, this remodel, and there's actually going to be an addition, is to go to single occupancy rooms. I have some concerns and want to understand where the census for this is now. In looking at my documents, I believe there's approximately 124 residents there. So if we go down to 120 rooms, I know they didn't even have a wait list through the pandemic. They were taking no new admissions for protocol reasons, which I totally agreed with, but I just have some concerns with going to all single occupancy rooms and not having any doubles. I'm afraid we're not going to have capacity in the future for those veterans who need to access this service. So if someone could elaborate on that and just kind of give us an idea of what the planning is on this. I just see 120 beds as not being sufficient.
Madam Chair, this is Kat Miller, Director of Veteran Services for the record. If it is all right with State Public Works, I think I can take this question.
Please proceed. Go ahead.
Thank you. Again, this is Kat Miller, Director of Nevada Department of Veteran Services for the record. And thank you so very much for the question, Chair Carlton. Let me start with this. First, in the future, for any of these VA grants for renovation, for remodels, for new construction, they have to be single rooms. So their guidelines have changed. They changed first in 2006 and then in 2019. So while we'll still be eligible with a 2-room facility to receive per diem and to receive, funds for the residents that are there, in the future, if we wanted to do any renovations, and I've got 3 grants in right now for a temperature control system and for other things, we would not be eligible for any grants for a double room facility. The other thing, and I think it was really proven in the pandemic, if you take a look at facilities that had single rooms versus double rooms, there is just no question. And there was a study done on influenza A, and you're 3.7 times more likely to get influenza A if you're in a double room in a nursing home versus a single room. So from a medical standpoint, a single room just makes so much more sense. But your question on census is a great one. And we had been maintaining a census between 165 and 170. So the need is there in the Southern Nevada community. And I had to give it a lot of thought. When we started this was pre-pandemic. We started this a couple of years ago. What was more important, making sure that people could receive care. Maybe it wouldn't be the top of the line, but at least they receive some care versus the very best care in the single rooms. And fortunately, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is investing a lot more money in home health care. And they recently passed the Mission Act. Congress passed the Mission Act, which includes additional money for caregivers of veterans who are staying at home. So there's per diem for them, there's extra funding. So their goal is to keep veterans at home longer than possible. And we're starting nationwide to see the impact of that. More veterans are receiving care at home or having drop-in centers such as adult day health care rather than have the 24/7 care. Would I like to have 180 single rooms? Absolutely. But we'd have to raise that building, to the ground and start all over. It is possible. And I think we've got a really good plan to be able to convert the existing facility to 120 bed and still be able to keep residents there. We'll still have to do a phased in approach, but we'll still be able to operate it while we're doing renovations as we have the plan right now. That was a pretty long answer to your question. I apologize. Did I get to the core of what you were asking?
And thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Miller. Yes, you did. I did not realize a lot of the funding was contingent upon single rooms. I guess I'm coming at it from the perspective of someone that goes to visit someone. And I know at times you do have spouses together in the same room that we like to keep them together if we can. And I would hate to see that option disappear for them, but I understand what you're looking at. And I know this is going to be a phased in approach. I was not aware of the Mission Act and the dollars that are going to keep veterans in their homes. I hope we can get that information out there a little bit more so that I can make sure that constituents of mine that called and said, I can't get into the veteran's home. I was like, well, let's see what's going on. Because sometimes a family can't, but if those dollars are available also, then that helps alleviate some of the concern. Moving forward, and this may have to be a conversation for some of the legislators on this committee that'll be around another 4 years from now, because I see there being a greater need in the future. So thank you. You did answer my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Additional questions from the committee on this subject? Senator Rowdy, please.
So, thank you, Chair. And Assemblywoman Carlton alluded to it, and I thought that it was the same question I had. Is there an exception for spouses? There are some of those folks who like being in the same room.
Madam Chair, through you to Senator Rowdy, I asked the same question of our veterans home administrators, and we have not had a case where they wanted to be together. And the problem is one spouse might have to get a shot at 3 o'clock in the morning. They want to be next to each other. They want the rooms to be co-joined, but we have not had a case where the spouses wanted to be in the same room. And a lot of that too is we don't have, since I've been here, we have only had one spouse couple, right? Where both the husband and wife were in the same nursing home. So maybe if we had a larger population, that would be the case. But it just hasn't been an issue at our homes to date.
Thank you very much. Additional questions? Okay, not seeing any. I think Mr. Patrick, Department of Veteran Services Maintenance Projects.
Ward Patrick for the record, thank you. Next slide, please. We'll go through these quickly. So this is in the Northern Nevada Memorial Cemetery in Fernley, Nevada. This is the pavilion renovation project, which was subject to the budget reductions. Here we see in a color aerial, and so there's two buildings within that red square. We'll dial in a little closer. And so this is the pavilion is the left building here, and again in Fernley. And so there's some various shots. We see the conditions here where there's staining of the finishes on the wooden trusses and beams, as well as if we were to look closer, we would see spalling and a discoloration of the masonry, and then window staining on the lower right-hand corner. It's a $300,000 project, approximately 100% state funded to perform the maintenance on this building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from our committee? Okay, well, did I hear someone? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick. I think that concludes your presentation. Am I correct?
Ward Patrick for the record, the reference project for temperature controls that Director Miller references, the last project on the list. And so I would just be available for any questions on that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee, any questions?
No, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Patrick, and your whole team for bringing this forward and answering all of our questions. These are always very interesting items to me, so thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Patrick. You have done yeoman's work. I think 45 CIP projects in one day is, or might be, a record. And so with that, if we have no more questions, we thank you profusely for all your work and your information. And we will go to public comment.
Thank you, Chair. If anyone would like to participate in public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. There is no one in public testimony at this moment.
All right, we'll pause just for a moment to make sure that we haven't missed anybody.
Thank you, Chair. There are no public commenters at this moment.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks, committee members, for hanging in there. These are always important conversations, and thanks to those who ended up coming and going for bills. So I appreciate all of that. And with that, please have a nice Easter weekend and enjoy your families if that's where you're going to be. And thank you, staff, for all your hard work. And with that, our meeting's adjourned. Oh, Senator Gansert, yes. Did you have a question or a comment?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will adjourn our meeting and see you all on Monday.
Thank you, Madam Chair.